Dougie B allegedly tried to rob one of his own fans, got arrested, and his life right now is sad. One of the fastest rising young artists out of New York City, a rapper who was filming music videos with Cardi B, collaborating with K-Flock and B-Love-E, and building one of the most electric fan bases in the entire drill movement, is now sitting in a legal nightmare that has put everything on hold. The alleged robbery of a 16-year-old fan was just the beginning. What came after was a string of serious criminal allegations that have painted a picture of a career collapsing under the weight of choices that had nothing to do with music. This documentary is going to break down exactly how it all happened, why the story hit so hard when it became public, and why so many people look at Dougie B's situation right now and just shake their heads. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down the full story of Dougie B, born Arian Howard, one of the most promising young voices the Bronx drill scene produced. We are getting into the alleged fan robbery, the violent robbery charges involving a father and his 5-year-old son, the courthouse arrest, the legal mess that followed all of it, and what the collapse of his career looks like right now. Let's get into it. Arian Howard, known to the world as Dougie B, was born on September 7, 2001, making him just 23 years old when everything started falling apart. He came up in the Bronx during one of the most exciting periods the borough's music scene had seen in years. The Bronx drill wave that emerged in the early 2020s produced a generation of artists who commanded massive YouTube audiences, dominated TikTok, and brought a new energy to New York City's long and storied rap tradition. Dougie B was positioned near the top of that wave. His delivery was energetic and aggressive in the way that Bronx drill demanded. His charisma on camera translated immediately. His willingness to go hard on the track without overthinking it made him exactly the kind of artist that the drill scene celebrated and rewarded with attention. Before the come-up, though, there was the foundation. Dougie B grew up in the Bronx during the period when the borough's street culture and creative energy were producing artists at a remarkable rate. He was shaped by the same environment that shaped the music he made, and his music reflected that authenticity in the way that drill always demands. The genre has no patience for artists who are performing a version of a life they do not actually live. The listeners in that space are sharp about detecting inauthenticity, and they reward the real thing with a loyalty that most other genres cannot match. Dougie B had that. His energy was not manufactured. His style was not constructed in a boardroom. It was the product of where he came from, who he ran with, and what he had actually seen. And that authenticity was visible in everything he put out, which is part of why the audience connected the way it did. His come-up happened fast. He built genuine chemistry with K-Flock and B-Love-E, two of the other most recognizable faces of the Bronx drill movement, and those collaborations helped broaden his reach significantly. But the moment that truly placed his name in front of the widest possible audience came in 2022 when he appeared in a music video with Cardi B. That clip went everywhere. Cardi B is one of the most famous rappers on the planet, and one of the most prominent figures to ever come out of the Bronx. Having her co-sign, even in the form of a shared visual, meant something. It signaled that the industry was watching and that the ceiling for what Dougie B could become was genuinely high. Fans who followed him closely felt like they were watching someone on the verge of breaking through in a major way. The courthouse arrest earlier in his career also deserves mention here, because it showed that the legal complications were not new. Back in 2022, Dougie B had been in Bronx Supreme Court on a drug case when shots were fired near the parking lot outside. He was taken into custody that day along with several others. His attorney confirmed his detainment. No charges immediately filed from that specific incident, but the pattern of appearing in connection with serious situations around the legal system was already establishing itself before the 2024 wave of allegations hit. The drill scene and the law have always existed in close proximity in the Bronx, and Dougie B was not the first artist from that world to find himself caught between the two. But the frequency with which his name was appearing in connection with criminal incidents should have been a warning signal. Now let's talk about the context of what was happening in Bronx drill at that moment, because it matters for understanding both how high he was and how far the fall has felt. Bronx drill was generating millions of views on a weekly basis. Labels were paying attention. Streaming numbers were climbing. The New York City sound had reclaimed cultural relevance in ways that older heads had been waiting years to see. And within that ecosystem, there was real money to be made and real fame to be built for artists who did not make the kinds of mistakes that would sideline them during the most important years of their careers. Dougie B had positioned himself to take full advantage of that moment. He had the collaborations, he had the fan base, he had the cosign from one of the borough's biggest names. What came next is what makes his story so difficult to sit with. The reason the fan robbery story spread so fast and hit so hard when it became public is worth examining before we get into the specifics of what allegedly happened. In hip-hop, particularly in drill, there is an unspoken contract between artists and their supporters. The fans are the ones who made you. They watched the early videos before you had any real reach. They shared the music before it had any real numbers. They showed up to the shows when you were still playing venues that could barely hold 200 people. And in exchange for that investment, the expectation is not complicated. Do not harm the people who helped you get where you were going. That expectation runs so deep that it does not need to be said explicitly. Everyone in that ecosystem understands it. And when an artist allegedly violates that understanding by targeting a supporter, particularly a minor, the reaction from the community is not measured. It is immediate and it is sharp. The first incident that started changing public perception of Dougie B happened in June 2024. A 16-year-old fan encountered him outside a barbershop on East 187th Street in the Bronx. The teenager recognized him and approached him the way any fan approaches an artist they admire, looking for a photograph and a moment with someone whose music they had been listening to. According to the fan's account and subsequent reporting, Dougie B took the photograph, and then he allegedly stole more than $1,000 in cash from the kid and left. Not from a random person on the street, from a fan, a teenager. Someone who came up to him out of pure admiration. Hip-hop blogs picked it up fast. YouTube commentary channels ran it as a major story. Social media users who had been fans and were now processing something deeply uncomfortable posted about it everywhere. Some defended him, arguing there was more context the public did not have. But the majority of the reaction fell on the side of disgust, and the specific detail that made it hardest to defend was the age of the alleged victim. This was a 16-year-old kid who thought he was getting a picture with his favorite rapper and walked away allegedly robbed instead. But here is where it gets real, because the fan story was not the end of Dougie B's legal troubles. It was not even the most serious chapter. While the internet was still processing the fan robbery allegations, the timeline of his alleged criminal activity continued moving forward. And what came next was significantly more violent and significantly more consequential. On August 27, 2024, Dougie B was allegedly part of a crew of 5 men who carried out a robbery inside an apartment in the Belmont neighborhood of the Bronx on Camberlang Avenue. The victim was a 33-year-old man. His 5-year-old son was with him. According to the Bronx criminal court complaint, Dougie B's role in that robbery was to block the father and his young child from being able to escape the apartment while his associates handled the rest. Another member of the crew flashed a gun at the father and seized his phone. They then drained $2,500 from his cash accounts, using that phone while his 5-year-old stood there unable to do anything. Think about that picture for a second. A father and his child, trapped inside their own home, unable to leave, with a gun in the room, while someone took everything from their accounts. And according to prosecutors, Dougie B was the one making sure they could not run. The real kicker, though, is that the crew did not stop there. 9 days later, on September 5, 2024, they allegedly went back to the same building and robbed again. The September 5th incident involved a different victim who was threatened at knife point. The suspects demanded his phones. One of them then took $500 from his digital wallet. According to court records, Dougie B himself allegedly approached the victim during this robbery while gripping his waistband and told him, and this is a direct quote from the complaint, "I got something for you." That statement, delivered while holding his waistband, was prosecutors' way of communicating that the threat was being backed by the implication of a weapon. The police caught up to the group on September 5th, the same day as the second robbery. All 5 were arrested. The charges that followed were serious: robbery and grand larceny as felonies, brought by the Bronx District Attorney's Office. Dougie B was denied bail. He was remanded, meaning he would sit in custody while his case proceeded through the court system. The potential sentence, if convicted of all charges, was reported at up to 25 years in prison. Now let's talk about the moment that crystallized just how chaotic this period of his life had become. On November 2nd, 2024, the day after he had been filming a music video in the Bronx with Cardi B, Dougie B was due in Bronx Supreme Court for a 2:15 p.m. appearance on a separate drug case. What happened before that appearance set off another wave of coverage and attention? A dispute broke out near the courthouse parking lot on East 161st Street. It escalated. A shot was fired. Court officers heard the gunshot, raced across the street, and took several individuals into custody. Dougie B was among those handcuffed and taken in. The arrest was caught on video and spread immediately. His attorney, Dawn Florio, confirmed he was among those detained. Here is the detail that made this moment so dramatic. The day before, he had been filming with Cardi B. The day of, he was in handcuffs outside a courthouse. That 24-hour window encapsulated everything about the trajectory of his life during this period. The courthouse arrest on November 2nd added yet another layer of chaos to an already overwhelming legal picture. The timing was almost impossible to believe when people processed it. One day he is filming a music video with Cardi B. The next day he is in handcuffs outside a courthouse because a gun went off near a parking lot before his scheduled court appearance. The video of him being detained spread immediately. People who had been following his legal situation were not surprised exactly, but they were struck by how compressed and accelerating the pattern of incidents had become. He was not catching a break between situations. Each new development was arriving faster than the last, and the cumulative effect was a public narrative that had fully shifted away from music. The legal situation has continued developing since those arrests, and the weight of the charges he faces is significant. For an artist who was building something real, for someone who had Cardi B's number in his phone and K-Flock vouching for his talent, for a 23-year-old who had seen his name in the kind of covers that most young drill rappers dream about, the legal reality he is facing right now represents a complete redirection of his life. The music has stopped, the videos are not being made, the collaborations are on pause. The fan base that he was building is still there in some form, but the conversation about him has shifted entirely from what track he is dropping next to what is happening in his court case. The fan reaction to his ongoing situation has been evolving over time. In the early days of the fan robbery story going viral, the response was mostly shock and condemnation. As the more serious charges involving the Belmont apartment robbery and the 5-year-old became public, the conversation shifted from anger to something closer to sadness, at least among the people who had genuinely been invested in watching him build something, because there is a difference between being angry at someone who does something wrong and feeling the specific kind of heaviness that comes from watching someone with real potential walk themselves directly into a situation that has no good outcomes. A lot of the fans who followed Dougie B were not following him casually. They were invested. They knew his catalog. They had been telling people to watch out for him, and having to process the allegations that followed meant having to reconcile the artist they believed in with the person described in court documents. What makes this situation hit differently than the average legal story in hip-hop is the specific nature of the alleged crimes. This was not a situation that emerged from the kind of incidents that people sometimes contextualize within the environment that produced the artist. The fan robbery was allegedly directed at a teenager who came up to him out of admiration. The Belmont robbery allegedly involved a 5-year-old child who could not leave his own home. These are not the kinds of circumstances that generate much sympathy or nuanced debate about systemic context. They are the kinds of circumstances that make people look at someone they were rooting for and feel a specific kind of disappointment that is hard to shake. The effect on his career cannot be overstated. Drill music moves fast. The Bronx drill scene that produced Dougie B was already evolving and shifting when his legal troubles took him off the board. Artists who were coming up behind him have continued developing. Collaborators have continued releasing. The industry has kept moving in the way it always does, completely indifferent to the circumstances of any individual within it. By the time November 2027 arrives, the landscape he left will look nothing like the one he is coming back to. And whatever he builds after that will have to start from a foundation that looks very different from the one he was standing on before the charges came. It is also worth thinking about the victims in this story, because they can get lost in the broader narrative about an artist's career trajectory. There was a 16-year-old fan who allegedly lost over $1,000 and lost a moment with an artist he admired. There was a 33-year-old father who allegedly had a gun flashed at him while his 5-year-old son watched and was unable to leave. There was a victim who had a knife pointed at them in the same building 9 days later. These are real people who were allegedly put through serious situations, and their experiences are the reason this story carries the weight it does. The discussion about Dougie B's career is a part of the story. The human cost of the alleged conduct is the center of it. For people who followed his career closely, for fans who genuinely believed they were watching someone build towards something significant, the sentencing that eventually came down made the story feel final in a way that the arrest alone had not. Dougie B was convicted of attempted robbery and sentenced to 4 years in prison. His earliest possible release date is November 13, 2027. That date is not an abstraction. That is the specific day that represents the earliest moment he could walk out of a correctional facility and attempt to rebuild whatever is left of the career he had been building before all of this began. 4 years. In drill music terms, 4 years is an entire generation of relevance. Artists rise and fall in months. New names emerge. Old names get replaced in playlists. The scene that produced him will be a completely different landscape by the time November 2027 arrives. And the version of Dougie B who existed before the charges is not the version that will walk out on the other side. There is also a conversation to be had about what happens to a career's legacy when the legal story becomes the dominant narrative. Before 2024, if you searched Dougie B's name, the first thing that would come up was music, videos, clips from his appearances, content that represented what he was building. After 2024, what comes up is the fan robbery, the Belmont apartment robbery, the 5-year-old, the courthouse arrest, the charges, the bail denial. None of that content has anything to do with who he was as an artist, but it is now the primary context in which his name is understood by anyone who encounters it for the first time. That is a shift that is extremely difficult to reverse, even if the legal situation were to resolve in his favor, because the internet does not forget, and the algorithm does not distinguish between the kind of attention that builds a career and the kind that ends. 1. The broader Bronx drill scene has dealt with this pattern more than once, and that repetition is part of what makes each individual story feel both specific and familiar at the same time. The same movement that produced Dougie B has also had to reckon with K-Flock's own serious legal situation, with multiple other artists whose careers were interrupted by criminal cases at exactly the moments when those careers appeared to be taking off. There is something genuinely painful about watching a cultural movement produce real talent and then watching that talent get removed from the equation before it fully gets a chance to express itself. The Bronx has always been capable of producing voices that resonate nationally and that carry the kind of energy the music world responds to. The question has always been whether those voices can navigate the circumstances around them long enough to be heard at full volume and allowed to grow into what they were capable of becoming. Dougie B had the talent to be one of those voices. He had the connections, the timing, the fan base, and the momentum that the movement needed to push someone to the next level. The November 2027 release date is what that potential looks like now, and there is no way to describe that outcome as anything other than what it is. Dougie B's situation represents one of the most direct examples of that painful pattern. He was capable, he was charismatic, he had the right connections and the right timing and the right fan base, and now he has a prison sentence and a release date sitting in November 2027. That is what his life actually looks like right now, and it is the reason so many people use the word sad when they talk about him. Not angry, not bitter, sad, because the version of his life that existed before 2024 had genuine promise. The version that exists now is defined entirely by what he allegedly took from other people. A 16-year-old fan, a father and his 5-year-old son, a victim threatened at knife point in a hallway. Instead of a studio, he has a prison cell. Instead of a release date for new music, he has November 13th, 2027, marked on a calendar somewhere as the day he might be able to walk out. Instead of building on the momentum of a Cardi B collaboration, he is serving time for attempted robbery while the Bronx drill scene he helped build continues moving forward without him. The people who once streamed his music are not sitting around waiting. The algorithm has already replaced him with whoever picked up the space he left behind. And when he does eventually get out, if he gets out on that earliest date, he will be walking into a music landscape that has had over 3 years to forget his name. The fan reaction to his sentencing followed a similar pattern to the reaction to the original charges, but with an added layer of finality. When the charges came out, people were angry and shocked. When the conviction and the 4-year sentence came out, the dominant response shifted to something quieter and heavier. People who had been his supporters were not celebrating. They were processing the specific sadness that comes from watching someone who who had everything they needed to succeed, confirmed the worst possible version of their story in a courtroom. Comments on posts about his sentencing were full of that energy. People saying what a waste. People saying they used to rock with his music. People saying the Bronx keeps losing its best voices to situations exactly like this. One, that collective disappointment from people who were genuinely invested in him is part of what makes the word sad so appropriate here. It is not a dismissal. It is a recognition of something real being lost. And it is the most honest response to a story that did not have to end this way. At the end of the day, Dougie B's story is a reminder of how quickly everything can be undone. Fame in drill music can arrive almost overnight. It almost did for him, but keeping it requires decisions that protect the opportunity rather than destroy it. And the alleged series of events that unfolded across 2024, culminating in a conviction and a 4-year sentence, did not protect anything. They dismantled everything that had been built and replaced it with the story that has very little to do with music and almost everything to do with the consequences of choices that led to a courtroom, a conviction for attempted robbery, and a release date in November 2027. The question of what happens next is one that only time can answer. Whether he comes out in November 2027 and finds a way back into music, whether the audience has moved on, or whether there is still something there waiting for him, nobody knows yet. What is known is the full picture of how he got here. The fan on East 187th Street who just wanted a picture. The father and his 5-year-old son on Camberling Avenue who could not leave their own apartment. The knife point robbery 9 days later in the same building. The courthouse handcuffs the day after filming with Cardi B. The conviction. The 4-year sentence. The November 2027 release date. That is the full story of Dougie B in 2024 and beyond. And every part of it is genuinely, undeniably sad. Drop your thoughts in the comments about whether you think he can rebuild after this, and subscribe so you never miss a breakdown like this. 1.